Hey everybody, it's Wes with Fundamental Games here with another video about dungeon makers. Now I'm going to teach you how the action tile works and kind of how to build your dungeon, the main concept of the game. So you will start the game with your starter tile in the center of your play space. Each player will. It's a two-player game, so the other player will have their own start tile and they will also have their play area in front of them. So I'm going to actually slide player 2 stuff out of the way, and we're just going to play with one player. So, or not play with one player, but show you one player. So I'm going to move all of their meeples out. So each player will have 5 meeples. Hope to have them customized by the time I get this all loaded to Kickstarter. Each player will have a double-sided action tile. One side has the main action and the other one has multiple actions. We're going to talk about that. Each player has a turn sequence tile and an action sequence explanation, and of course a video I previously did an explanation of the tiles and the icons. So I'll put that one to the side, and then each player has 3 block tiles, which will be important to recognize what they do. Alright, so when you start the game, you start with your starter tile, with your action tile, and these are stuff on the side. So this first action, it's actually on both sides, so every single turn of the game you could place a tile every turn if you wanted to. And even though that may speed you through the game, it's not guaranteed to win you the game. And so when you use this icon, you pick a tile from one of the 3 dungeon stacks. So there's always 3 stacks face up during the game, but you can only pick the top of one of the stacks. And you're playing against your opponent, so watching what they do is important too. So let's say I grab this tile. I then have to place it immediately, and it has to be placed adjacent to a pathway that I have open on my dungeon. So right now I have all my sides open. You can't put it diagonal. It always has to be orthogonal. And you can only go up to a distance of 2 in any direction to form a 5x5 grid in your dungeon. So let's say I grab that tile and I've placed it. Now because I placed a stair, I get a point immediately on the point tracker, but I explained that on a different video. And once you have done that, you flip the tile over and your turn comes to an end. So this tile stays in front of you the whole game. Your opponent always knows what position it's in, but you put it face up in front of you. Then your opponent would go, they'd take their turn, then it'd be back to your turn. Now on your turn, when your tile is in on this side, you have a few more options. You can always choose the left, right, or center action that is on this tile. You cannot choose the top or the bottom. And the reason for that is you have to, if you use the left or the right, you have to rotate it so that the top icon is the action that you're taking. Or if you choose the center, you don't rotate it at all. You just will flip it over at the end of the turn. Either way, you're going to flip it over at the end of the turn, but you only rotate it if you are using the left or right action. So I'm going to go through each of the actions that are on here and explain them to you. I've already explained this action, which is a center action. So first let's explain this action. If I were to rotate it this way, this would be the place a meeple action. I'm just going to build out this dungeon in front of us here. Pretend we've had a few extra turns, so you can kind of understand that a little bit more. So let's do that. We'll throw another chamber tile out over here. I don't know if I just tilted my camera, but there you go. Let's say the dungeon's like that right now. So the place a meeple action says I can take a meeple from my supply. I start the game with 5, and I can put it anywhere in my dungeon. So I could put it in this chamber. That's worth a point at the end of the game. I could put it over here. I could put it in the center. It doesn't matter where I put it. I don't get any points when I place the meeple. But at the end of the game, I do get 3 points for every one of these in my dungeon. So it is lucrative to have them in place. So that is the place a meeple. Now there is one other caveat to that. So let's say this was my dungeon and my opponent was taking that action. If I have an opening on my 5x5 grid on a border, so 2 tiles away from the center of my dungeon, I've left an opening and my opponent could come in and sneak in. And so instead of placing their meeple in their dungeon, they could place it in my dungeon, and at the end of the game this guy's going to cause me to lose 5 points. So it's not good to keep openings to the outside of your dungeon because sneaky guys may try to make you lose some points. But that is the place a meeple. You can either place one in your dungeon, or if your opponent has an opening on the border of their dungeon, you could sneak in and cause them to lose points at the end of the game. All right, next action is the move a meeple action. So the way, or move a minion, I'm going to call them meeples in this game because that's what's on the table. But move a meeple action allows me to move a meeple as far as I can through any number of tunnel tiles or T-tiles, but I have to stop at the first non-tunnel tile. So I could move 1, 2, 3, 4 in this example because that's a tunnel, that's a tunnel, that's a tunnel, and that's not a tunnel. So if I move 4, I will earn 4 points on the score track. So wherever my cube is, I'd move 4 points up, which is pretty decent. Now, if I were to move this way, 1, 2, I'd have to stop there because that is a chamber tile. I can't move any further. Or if I were to go there, there's nowhere else to go. I'd have to stop there. So it makes the most sense to move through as many tunnels as you can. And part of the strategy of the game might be to try to accrue tunnel tiles so you could take advantage of the points you get from patrolling your tunnels. The other thing you can do with moving is if there's a block tile in your dungeon at the end of your turn and you've moved a meeple adjacent to that, at the end of your turn you can remove the block tile and the meeple from the game. So it's a way to remove a block tile. Or like I said previously, if your opponent snuck a guy into your dungeon, let's say I move my meeple there, I gain my point, and at the end of the turn I could remove both of these from the game. So I am sacrificing my meeple, but me losing my 3-point meeple is better than losing 5 points at the end of the game. So you have that option. So that is the move a meeple action. You can move through tunnel tiles and maze tiles to gain points. You can remove blocks, and you can remove enemy tokens. So I said there's no combat in the game, but there is a little bit of take that you can dismantle with that option. All right, next action is the swap a tile action. So the swap a tile action allows you to take any tile in your dungeon and swap it out with another tile. So let's say maybe I'm not too worried about, maybe I just want to get a few more water points. You can see here I already have 2 water tiles in my dungeon. So maybe I'm not really needing this, we'll use this example. Maybe I'm not too worried about getting that 1-point treasure. And at the same time, I also want to expand my dungeon. So I could remove this from the game and swap it out with this tile and put it here. Now I can't rotate it in a way that I'd have a legal pathway. So I could place it like this, and when I place that, even though it was a swap action, it's new to my dungeon, so I gain 3 points for that particular one. If you want more information on the tile system, there is a separate video that talks about the tile types and how you get points with that. So swapping a tile not only lets you kind of reorganize your dungeon a bit, but also allows you to gain points from tiles that give you points when you place them. So that is the swap a tile action. Other tiles that are good to swap are tiles like stairway tiles because they're not worth points at the end of the game. They give you points when they entered play. And then finally, there is the place a block or move a tile action. So the place a block action is a little bit of take that in the game where you can take a block from your 3-block supply and put it in your opponent's dungeon adjacent to any tile. So I can put it here, put it here, put it here. If there's available path, it has to go adjacent to a pathway so that they do have the opportunity to remove it at some point. But it's good in a couple of ways. It helps block paths that they may have been relying on to place their next tile, and it gives them a loss of 2 points at the end of the game if they don't remove it. So placing those allows you to rotate your action tile, which is important in the game. Allows you to give your opponents negative points and block critical points in their dungeon. So pretty handy piece in the game. Alternatively, if you don't have any blocks left or you don't want to place a block, you can do the move a tile action. So what that lets you do is take any tile in your dungeon, pick it up, and as long as you don't disconnect your dungeon, you can move it anywhere. So I wouldn't be able to move this because I'd have a disjointed dungeon there, but I could, if I wanted to, take this and move it up here. And there's different reasons why you might want to do that. If you move a maze tile or a puzzle tile, you gain points for moving them. It's kind of like you're making your dungeon plans dynamic and confusing anybody that might be wandering in. So moving a maze tile or a puzzle tile gets you an extra point. When you move a tile, you get a point regardless. And again, it may help prevent bad decisions that you made early in the game, or help open up any areas that you couldn't properly prepare earlier in the game. So that is a move action. Now, after every one of these actions is taken, you must flip your tile over, but keep it oriented in the same way. So at the end of the turn, if I had placed a Meeple action and put a Meeple here, I would then flip my tile over and leave it on the table face up in front of me with that side up. So then on my next turn, I have no choice but to take the place a tile action. So I would pick a tile from up here. Maybe I pick this puzzle tile, put it into play. Puzzle tile gains me 2 points. And at the end of the turn, I flip my action tile over, again from left to right, so that the Meeple action that I took last time is still face up. And so what that means is on my next turn, I cannot use that action, and I can't use the bottom action. Again, when your action tile is in this position, you can do left, right, or center. And center just lets you place another tile. So in this case, now I'd be able to do the swap or the block or move action. And when I do that action, at the end of my turn, I flip it over. And so every second turn, I have to place a tile. And that forces the game to progress. And then the other actions, because you have to rotate it and flip, every action can only be used at a maximum once every 4 turns. Because if I place a Meeple, that's my next turn, or I have to flip it. So my next turn, I have to place a tile, 1 turn, flip it over. My next turn, if I wanted to get back to placing a Meeple, I'd have to rotate and do another action. So that's 2 turns. Then it would flip. Then on my 3rd turn, I would place a tile and flip. And then on my 4th turn, I could finally place a Meeple again. So 4 turns in order to repeat an action. And that helps force some different action use in the game and make sure that we don't overuse or abuse any particular action too many times. Like getting a block 3 turns in a row could be devastating, but once every 4 turns, not as hard to deal with. So there you have it. That is the action tile mechanism of the game. I will have one more video about tile placement and build out a full dungeon in kind of a quick action sequence. Thanks for watching.